Summerpalooza 2 mainly about cartoons and shows that I haven't talked about in a while. I guess that I should probably talk about NNA because I haven't talked about that show in such a long time. Out of all the shows, this show was honestly the most complicated for me to actually get back to. So for the episode I'm going to be reviewing is A Fistful of Ed. Yeah, which is actually the final episode of this show despite the lost episodes in the Big Picture show movie. With this being the season 5 episode, it's obvious that the characters are in school right now, completely doing their experiments and assignments. And considering the fact that nearly all the kids of this show are completely at school, we completely see so many hijinks and so many situations. Anyway, now when Double D completely does the research on the assignments from the other students, where they completely did the hatching egg assignment, the Kanko sisters demand to eat the eggs. Yeah, it's really no obvious that the fact that these Kankos are just gonna do whatever they want just so that they can eat food out of something that isn't supposed to be food, and also, well, make out with the eggs. Now, Double D completely protects the eggs from getting eaten while he's holding the book on how it's not right to eat something out of not flanderized eggs. I think that's how you pronounce it. He drops the book on one of the Kanko's legs. Well, feet actually, but still similar. Which actually leads to Double D actually did a really violent move despite the fact that it was mainly an accident. Because let's be honest here, when you completely see what Double D does later in this episode, it really goes to show onto why the Eds aren't really much fighters against other characters in this show. When Eddy completely heard rumors that Double D completely took down one of the Kanko sisters, he really didn't think that it was believable because, like I mentioned, the Eds aren't fightable. But once Wolf demands some kind of help from Double D to get some pencils, Double D completely kicks Wolf right in the eye while also completely shooting Wolf with pencils in his collection. And after completely beating down Johnny and the other third of the Kinko sisters, yeah, I know they have names, but at the same time, I don't want to have so many names being brought up because it's difficult to keep process on so many names, even the fact that this show I've watched since I was long actually convinced everyone to completely defend themselves against Double D. This just is an issue I have with this episode, but I'll get to that later. For right now, the final blow between the fight that Double D has been causing, he completely tries to take the chair away from Ed, which actually leads to a huge, disastrous fight in the cafeteria, despite the fact that it wasn't. With so many people staying far away from Double D being the next school bully, despite the fact that Kevin is mostly a school bully, but since that he's not really a main character in this, I can't talk about him whatsoever. This leads to Double D completely upset and really depressed that he's mostly a fiend now that just can't control himself whatsoever. But when Jimmy completely sees that he completely made a beautiful rose flower or something, or a different rose flower, whatever you call it, this actually convinced Jimmy that Double D was actually innocent the whole time. And we actually get some flashbacks between Double D and the incidents that's been happening this whole time. And that's why I'm going to stop talking about the story, because I just need to get this out of the way, and the fact that the Eds aren't really much fighters. This being the final episode involving one of the Eds completely being violent against other characters, they really don't know how to make any of this work, so they had to do what Double D did off-screen in the first half of this episode. Yeah, they did this off-screen gimmick, which I really cannot stand, but considering that this episode isn't really anything that actually made me upset, unlike what My Little Pony did, I honestly think that this way of doing off-screen material is just mainly being on the safe side for the most part. My issue with it, however, is the fact when we actually get to see it on screen, which shows that they probably want to have the other characters be mostly deaf in order to make this plot work. They really had to make the other characters deaf in order to see that Double D was actually a really dangerous fighter. Sure, other stuff might be blocked, like the chairs and tables and stuff like that, but that isn't really that much to actually see the big picture of this. In all honesty, the off-screen thing in this doesn't really make me upset, but it still is mostly questionable for what this episode is trying to do. Like I mentioned, the Eds, Eddy, Double D, and Ed aren't really much fighters because they're not really that trained whatsoever, because they're always a three-group person that don't usually do a lot and just do schemes just to get money and stuff like that. But since this is the 5th season of the show, and this is the final episode, they probably want to do something with the egg characters, so they had to have Double D actually do something in this episode. I will say that it's a good choice to have Double D do a vital thing in this, but I honestly think that it still doesn't excuse the fact that they're not much fighters. They had to actually have the off-screen stuff work in this in order to make this final episode work out for Double D being a bully in the school. Before any of you ask, yes, I actually did watch this episode when I was younger. This isn't one of those episodes that I have watched up as of right now, which was new to me, but couldn't able to watch it because I missed it. I did watch this episode when I was a little kid, and to be quite honest, I did like it, but just like every other episode, I just like every bit of it. But when I look at this episode right now, I honestly think that everything what WD went through is just obviously a misunderstanding in the fact that people who don't actually see Double D, but the off-screen material actually makes them deaf, really makes this episode a lot more weirder and a lot more hard to understand with it being the final episode. And for more proof onto why I don't think that this episode really works for its advantage, when they completely have Jimmy and Double D completely trash-talk each other to have a fight in the woods, and have so many people watching it, it was actually a good idea, but considering the fact that Double D is facing Jimmy, even if Jimmy is the closest person that he can actually talk to because of what's been happening, it's really obvious of what's going to happen next. It's just basically the next downfall for the Eds, despite the fact that it wasn't all of Double D's intentional doings. Because when they actually get to the fight, we get this. They made a sissy fight, and they completely run around, and this actually convinces the other characters that Double D is still intimidating. I honestly don't see how this episode actually works when it comes to having Double D becoming a fighter, despite the fact that everything that happened between him was just all accidental. And even if Double D tried to actually did all this all intentional, maybe I would justify most of what I said, but the fact that it wasn't intentional really makes this episode hard to actually think that this is the final episode, and the fact that the writers making one of the Eds an unintentional fighter doesn't really work whatsoever, even for the final episode. As for Eddy in this episode, it's really obvious that what happens between him and the other characters, mainly his friends, he obviously really wants to take this opportunity to his advantage at any times, gaining quotas, becoming popular, and all that kind of stuff. I don't have an issue with him, but he's just basically what this episode is going for while involving Double D's midday crisis. So I honestly think that what he's been doing in this episode is just honestly what he does in every other episode. So I honestly think that I'm really obviously not that surprised of what happens next between him and the Eds. And here's something that really makes this episode really hard for me to believe that the Eds can accidentally be fighters against the other characters. If this happened in the first season, it will probably work out. But this is something that happened at the end of the 5th season. And then during times like this, characters, mainly Kevin, Sarah, Johnny, and sometimes Naz, completely go violent against the Eds because of what they've did for so many times in the show. So I honestly don't understand onto why they're so feared that Double D is going to take them down. With so many years, I just don't think that it will ever come to this. The fact that they're actually deaf, while also afraid of completely facing off Double D. Out of all the characters, Kevin, who actually beats up the Eds so many times in the show, will probably beat Double D at his own game in his own way because he's a fighter. So I honestly do not understand onto why everyone is just afraid. Why? It's because they're trying to learn that fighting is bad in school, despite the fact that they are about to viciously assault the Eds of what happened in Big Picture Show. Because I honestly think that with Big Picture coming out way after this episode, really makes this lesson that I just mentioned a lot more meaningless, despite the fact that the writers of the show want to actually continue the show by having the characters go to school. Jeez, I'm really going all over the place, am I? And if you want to know onto why WD got his old reputation back, is because Eddy was completely throwing hot dogs and completely mocking Jimmy, which actually enrages him. In all honesty, this is mainly Eddy's fault that Double D is just basically got his old reputation back. So I honestly think that it's basically his own fault that all this ended up backfiring. Besides, if he didn't actually mock Jimmy whatsoever in this episode, then maybe we're probably just going to get the rest of the episode involving Double D and Jimmy just completely running around and just making sissy fights. Which is something that will probably make the ending of this episode a lot more lazier and stupid, if you ask me. With this being the final episode, I'm actually kind of mostly glad that there was actually a lost episode after this, and the fact that the Big Picture Show just came out at the end of 2009. So I honestly think that if this is actually something that the Eds can actually end off without those materials afterwards, will probably make this final episode mostly forgettable. But I will say this, though, that when the Kanko's completely about to, do what to Double D? To Double D, Eddy completely snaps that he has enough away, which is actually kind of hilarious just by looking at this reaction. Seriously, I just can't get over it. Even the fact that it's been more than 10 years since this episode came out, I just cannot get over that reaction. It's just really hilarious. As for the ending of this episode, it just mainly involves the Eds eating hot dogs in the end, which is actually kind of a great way to end off this show in some other way if there wasn't the last episodes and the Big Picture Show. But in all honesty, it's just basically the Eds being themselves mostly. And if we actually if we actually got more episodes instead of just the last episodes, I can guarantee you that season 6 will probably be mainly focused during the winter time instead of just completely about a dance and patrol outside of the school. That's literally all I can think of when it comes to more NA episodes, but that was just a prediction that never came to be when I was younger, and when I make it up right now, it honestly makes this this statement I have right now mostly unnecessary, but that's just basically what I think of when I look at cartoons these days. I think that this episode was watchable, but I honestly think that it's mostly forgettable for what they did when it comes to Double D. So I keep mixing up his name with WWE because his names is so similar to that. And the fact that most of the plots in this episode, is honestly a way to have some of the ads being files, despite the fact that it just doesn't work whatsoever, because what I've mentioned minutes in this review. But it really goes to show that this show doesn't really need a 6th season whatsoever, and the fact that it ended off right now is probably the best way, despite the lost episodes in the big picture show. I give this episode a 7.5 out of 10.